So when we make a product bet, then we're not making a bet on a particular solution. Like, all right, we're going to build a sensor that has like these characteristics and like these features and parameters, and then we're going to like ship that and it's going to work out great. That's not how we do it. We more bet on like, all right, we know that there's this specific type of vessel, say, that we want to be able to sense. That is what we need to solve. And is it hardware? Is it software? Is it like hardware plus software? What kind of hardware and software? Like that, I don't care as much about that. It's just mostly trying to keep people laser focused on generating the mission outcome for the products that we develop.
Thousands of companies show up to sell their technology to the U.S. Department of Defense each year, but so few will transition from proof of concept to true production across the valley of death. The select few who do, their stories are rarely told. Until now. I'm Noah Scheinbaum, and this is Crossing the Valley.
Vannevar Labs is building the next generation non-kinetic defense prime. Today, they're mentioned in the same breath as defense behemoths like Anduril and Palantir. Since founding the company in their Stanford dorm room in 2019, CEO Brett Granberg and President Nini Hamrick have grown the company dramatically. From $3.5 million in annual contract value in 2021, they did $25 million in 2022, before growing to $49 million last year. What's even more crazy is, unlike most of their peers, they're already profitable. Brett and Nini know that defense modernization is not a fight that's going to be won by one company alone. And so they're investing in the ecosystem. They support up-and-coming founders, and they've shared their lessons about how to build great products for defense, as well as how to scale sales in the federal market. That's why I'm so excited to have them as our guests today. One quick note before we jump in, due to some audio and visual difficulties, the majority of this episode is going to be audio only. Today, we are thrilled to have Brett Granberg, the CEO, and Nini Hamrick, the president of Vannevar Labs, one of the most talked about and exciting companies in defense tech today. Nini is just back from a big life experience as a new mother, so we're super grateful for you both for making the time to be with us here today.
Thank you, Robert. We're stoked.
Amazing. Okay, so Brett, Nini, you guys have been, I think, in many ways, some of the most helpful to the ecosystem of founders working in defense tech. You've written your blog posts on how to get your first defense pilots, how to build products for defense, how to close sales in defense. Our must reads, we'll link to them in the show notes. If any listeners have not seen those already, you got to get over there. But I want to talk just a little bit. We'll spend a little bit of time on the company's founding and much more of the time on how you all have grown as fast and as broad as you have in a really remarkable time frame. So Brett, when you were back as a student at Stanford, when you guys were out doing the roadshow, talking to the 60 investors, however many investors it was to get that first term sheet, what did Vannevar actually have? Did you guys have a working prototype? Did you have a slide deck? Did you just have an idea? What stage did you start fundraising?
Yeah, it was really just the idea. And the idea for Vannevar for me started actually a couple of years. It was probably like we fundraised in 2019. For me, it probably started around 2016 in my job before school, which was working with the Counterterrorism Center at CIA at InQtel. And so it was like 3 years of kind of like thinking about like the space, why certain problems were happening, and how a company or a team might fix them. And so by the time that I got to GSB, which for me was like the backup plan, is like, all right, I want to do this. I think it's possible to start a company. I don't know if any investors are going to give us any money. At the time, defense was like pretty unpopular. And so GSB was like a 2-year period where, it's like a time for me to go try to do that. And if I failed, then, like it's all good. We'll go do something else. But yeah, so when we started fundraising, Nini and I both worked on the same mission problem prior to GSB in the counterterrorism domain. And so for us, it was more like, hey, we know this problem really well. We think there's like a broader set of issues within defense that a team, that looks kind of like us plus other people might be able to solve. Does anybody want to help us solve it? That was kind of the pitch that we went out with.
No, a 2-year kind of exploration chamber, I think, is maybe the best way to think about business school. If you don't have something you're working on, it's really easy to just spend a lot of money, waste a lot of time. So I think it's great that you did that. And I'm curious what the reaction was from professors and from classmates, because defense tech wasn't really a thing in 2017, 2018. It really was kind of right as you guys got started in 2019 was when you started seeing money kind of flowing in. What was the reaction? Were people trying to talk you out of it? Were they supportive?
People, the classmates were all amazingly supportive, and that was really cool. Like the peers at GSB were awesome. Everybody was really stoked and supportive of us. The professors, like, definitely not as much. I think we had some like kind of startup-y type professors that we were talking about, hey, we're going to start a company. But when it came down to, hey, we're going to like drop out to do this, there was like a pretty big disconnect where people were like, you shouldn't drop out. You got to stay. If you drop out, I'm not going to help you. There were some people that definitely went in that direction. So actually, very few professors outside of like Steve Blank in the Hacking for Defense crew, I would say we have like any meaningful relationship with. But peers at GSB, awesome, like very supportive. Yeah, there were like, I more saw the disconnect between Silicon Valley and defense when we were going out to recruit engineers. That instance, nope, like engineers is still kind of the mindset of defense is, evil, like possibly, like some people are like defense is bad, government is bad. Ads are good. I want to work on like ads and put Instagram or whatever, but that faded obviously with like the Ukraine war and, some of the stuff happening in Israel and some of the stuff happening in Asia. So we've seen kind of a pivot away from that, but the GSB community was phenomenal for us.
Awesome. So you guys were fundraising. You didn't have a product yet. At what point did you start talking to customers? Had you talked to prospective customers or end users while you were fundraising to validate this, or did you wait until you had money in the bank?
Yeah, so we had talked to end users because Brett and I were working on a problem originally that we both had like just left the community of people that we're working on. And so I called colleagues and I was like, hey, I want to start a company. This is the first problem we're going to solve. And they're like, I'm sorry, you've been at business school for 2 weeks and you're calling me, telling me you want to start a company, which is just so abnormal for people in government to think about. And was very new for me too. But I was, calling with questions about how we could solve a problem that we all knew really intimately, that Brett and I had seen just being a mounting problem in the counterterrorism world for, half a decade. And that was the kind of validation that we're doing. Brett also had worked at a company as a chief of staff that, was in this space and had talked to customers in this space as well. So Brett, I don't know if you consider that customer validation, but I think that's the types of conversations we were having leading up to fundraising.
So you guys have talked a lot about what it takes to land an early pilot. I don't want to spend too much time on that because I think you've put a lot out there. But one question I do have for you is how to think about which pilot to choose and which to say no to as a company.
Yeah.
And maybe sometimes it's just, hey, whatever we can get. But did you all think about what the trajectory would be or how it would be different depending on which user group you went to first?
Yeah. So I would say for your first deal, it is whatever you can get, and like the fastest thing you can possibly get is what you should go after. That is, with some like extreme exceptions, I'm sure that's generally like you should just focus on trying to get somebody to pay you anything to do anything. That's like your first step. I would say the big strategic decision that we made wasn't necessarily around how do we qualify out customers, but it was more around what types of contracts we went after. We actually very much deprioritize anything SBIR, innovation money, like anything that sounded like innovation money or innovation funds. Especially people are most familiar with SBIR programs, so I'm mentioning that. We deprioritize. And the reason for that is that type of revenue is by definition non-recurring. So you can do all this really cool work, and it's like kind of a development-y contract. So you're going to do some custom engineering. You're going to like build it for somebody. If it goes well, your path is like, okay, maybe you like get like a phase 2 or like a phase 3, but there's not like a program office or usually like also a dedicated, excited mission owner that you have to then convert that into a bigger deal. I knew about some of that before Vannevar, and so we kind of vectored that way. But I think that's like a very common mistake that people make is way over indexing on innovation funds and innovation groups versus like actual mission groups and actual program offices. There's a huge difference in terms of what growth looks like after your initial deal.
So Brett laid out kind of what it takes or how you guys chose the pilots. Nini, the question I have for you is how do you earn the trust with those organizations where there is an incumbent technology, whether it's good or not, there's something that those user groups were using to do their mission the day before you walked in. So when you show up, maybe you have a prototype, but you might just have an idea. What does it take to actually get a group to say, yes, I believe, or I'm willing to give it a shot when you walk in there on day one?
Yeah, well, the first thing is thinking about why are you there? Like, why are they taking this meeting with you? And what is your purpose there? And I think when I approached this, like in the very, very early days, I know we were talking earlier about, business school and first starting the company and, who you're getting advice from. And I got a bunch of advice around like how people sell to large enterprises. And that has a lot to do with, sales techniques. And you walk in and you're offering kind of an exclusive beta, and there's a bunch of technical differentiation that the user group cares about. And it turns out in defense, like none of that really matters. Like this isn't really about sales. It's about solving a problem together. And the problems that we choose to solve, it's not typical that the user group actually has any capability existing to solve that problem. Typically, we're looking at areas that are relatively new for the government, because in this new national security domain of competition with nation states, like there are very few existing incumbent technologies. And so it's more like the way that we're able to build trust is that we spend a lot of time just focused on what is the mission problem, figuring that out side by side with the user group. That involves, for instance, like sending people from our team, whether that's engineers, product people, people from my team, which is the mission team, out to deployed locations where these users are actually trying to solve the problem, whether that's in Europe or Asia. And as I said, sitting side by side with them, I think that earns a ton of trust, just the willingness to really dig in with them. And then the other way you earn trust almost immediately is by, as you are figuring out the problem together, doing things to try and solve it and delivering back to that user group within a week of having, figured out the first part of the problem. We're actually building things with them and deploying them on their mission and trying to get to like the first, real mission outcome from solving this problem together. And that earns a tremendous amount of trust. I think it's really about that why. Why are you deploying forward? Why are you having the meeting? And what are the first several things you do when you encounter an unsolved problem with one of these user groups?
It's one of those themes that I think it does set apart kind of modern defense tech companies and startups from some others, which is just the speed of mission impact that you can deliver as a company that's operating in days or weeks as your time frame, as opposed to months or years as a time frame. It resonates with the folks who are doing the mission. And so for you to just be able to come in and, even if they walk out on day one, that you can do the things that you're doing, that you say you're going to do, if there's a little bit of skepticism, your ability to come back a week later and show a working prototype or even to solve a small problem that might be non-core to the product that you're building, but to solve a small problem for the user group that you're embedded with or that you're working with, I think is something that we see from a lot of the great companies that have managed to cross the valley or have managed to gain traction in the defense community. One thing I wanted to turn to was, as you all thought about early pilots with your first product, Decrypt, how did you think about kind of the champion and who you selected or who found you as a champion that was able to take you all on this journey to grow the product and to grow the impact that you all had?
I'll start and would love to hear Brett chime in on this. The champions that we're looking for are typically pretty obvious. It's the person in the room that's really ambitious to solve these problems and isn't satisfied that their group, for instance, isn't able to keep up with the pace or the depth of operations that they want to be, pursuing in this strategic competition environment. There are pockets of people throughout government, whether they're program managers or O6s on the DoD side or users, who really want to be building future-looking capabilities and really are hungry for teams like ours to partner with. And you can always spot them in a meeting. They're the one who is getting really specific with you about what they're working on and the parts that are unsolved. And once you have won their trust, as we were just talking about, which isn't, generally isn't easy, but after you've proved that what you're doing is actually going to make a meaningful dent on their mission, they're the ones pulling you into, the next operation they're planning, or the next, set of operations they're planning that you can meaningfully impact. Those have been our best champions. And the magic is really also when you start to tie those people together. So we encounter them in different places out forward and, when we have teams in Europe and Asia, or back in the US at a program office, when you find a program manager who really wants to lean in on initiatives that he or she thinks are going to make a dent, and then you tie those two people together, that's when things start to really, you're cooking with gas in terms of a deployment where a program manager can actually make investments in a mission group that's doing really unique, novel things in contested areas around the world.
Yeah, if you had to summarize our, I don't know, maybe 70% of our go-to-market, it's like just finding those people, like just finding the really sharp, ambitious, mission-motivated, and effective people, both on the mission sides, like O5s and O6s typically, and then on the program manager side. Like that is like, I don't know, 60, 70% of the work. You can't do anything without those people.
Yeah, you guys have talked about, getting somebody irrationally excited about the product that you're bringing to the table. I'm curious, one thing that we see, sometimes that startups will do is you'll pack a board full of former 4-star generals or admirals or folks who are super senior, because the idea is, well, they can call in and they can get their friends to kind of support us. I'm curious, what level have your best champions been? Has it been a range? Are they flag officers? Are they 0506 kind of colonel, lieutenant colonel types? Have you found a sweet spot there?
Typically for us, it's what Brett said. It's the combination of an 05 or 06 who actually owns the mission problem. I mean, the most important thing is that they actually have missions that they're trying to execute. That's kind of the sweet spot for us, because that's where our products are actually going to, when deployed, generate mission outcomes, and tying them together with a program manager. This is, typically a GS13 to GS15 civilian in the DoD who is trying to, with, the part of their budget that's actually discretionary where they can make bets, they're looking for ways to make bets on kind of emerging capabilities that are being demonstrated in pilots with their user groups that they can start to build new programs around or fold into existing programs. So when we think about advisors, we're typically thinking about people that have worked with these types of people, who know them, who understand the decisions that they're trying to make on a daily basis. We have found that there are, definitely general officers who have this same level of like mission fire and ambition, of course, to solve problems. And when we find them, we pull them onto our team. Rich Clark, former SOCOM commander, is in this category for us of like, he has been an incredible mission partner, but it's because Rich really cares about the outcomes that are being generated by that GS14 program manager or the 05, 06 commanding officer and the sets of users that work with them, less so because he is introducing us to other general officers.
I think that's great. When you get a champion working for you, working for the advancement of the capability that you've brought to the table, that they've seen in action, that has changed the game for them, what does that look like? I'm curious if there's a story you can share of when when the first time or one of the first times when a champion actually walked you all into a program office or to another customer and said, "Hey, you got to take a look at what Vannevar's got."
Yeah. I think one example for us is there's a Marine Corps colonel that we partner with who is probably one of my favorite human beings that I've ever met. He's kind of more oriented on strategic competition and is like more interested in not just like traditional intelligence and in some of the traditional functions that DoD has played, but more kind of like creative special activities type stuff that maybe needs to occur in kind of like the new paradigm that exists right now with nation state competition. And for him, the relationship that we have with him and his group was like, first of all, the only reason he started talking with us is because we deployed Decrypt with some of his folks, and they were all of a sudden able to like provide better intel briefs, and like the mission outcomes that they were achieving were better. And then it became clear that like we were one of the reasons for that. But once we kind of built that initial partnership, we have deployed overseas with his people, like, I don't even know how many times now, many times, like everywhere. And we've co-developed multiple new products and missions for him. And there was one particular, like, bigger kind of operation with a lot of folks from his organization that was occurring overseas. where we deployed some of the new things we were working on for the first time over like a 2-week period. And coming back from that, we were able to show some mission outcomes or different ways to think about the mission that they previously hadn't. Like they were doing this type of operation like many times before, but this allowed them to kind of see actually what was happening in the strategic competition domain and actually give them some avenues to affect it in ways that they otherwise couldn't. And those are the meetings that I get most excited about, because that's where, like if we're doing our job, that's where, he will turn to you and be like, this is like absolutely incredible. I can't believe you guys did this. Like, how do we, like, let's do more of this. And I think actually on that trip, to your point of like walking us to different groups and program offices, he kind of subsequently walked us to his counterparts in another service that were at a different base, kind of in a similar location for a different set of missions. I know I kind of have to talk around like the specifics of what we actually were working on there, but that kind of relationship you only build by being really useful to start. Like, it's not like, oh, my friend introduced us to this kernel and like now he likes us. No, it's like he only talked to us in the beginning because we were providing value for his people. In us orienting as a company over multiple years now on just doing that, like that is what we do. We orient to just support that person's mission and help his team kind of push the boundaries of what they're able to accomplish. That's like how you over a long period of time with engineering and product and like mission support, all that kind of stuff. That is how you kind of take something from, like from a business standpoint. I think we started with a very small, like, maybe actually it was free. It was like, we do these things called VDAs. There's a free trial. And now that customer group is now like, more than eight figures for us in terms of revenue. And that's just because of long-term partnering really closely on the mission.
Yeah, it's an awesome story, and there's so many different ways I want to take it. I did real quick, Brett, just because you said free, and many in the government or in the government space will hear alarm bells go off when you say the words free, right? I've fought with DoD lawyers for a number of years on pro bono assistance. When you guys say free, what's the mechanism you use for that? Are these CRADAs, cooperative research and development agreements? Are there some other creative ways that you all have even convinced some of these mission leaders to take and play with what you all produce without them, fearing that they're going to go to jail?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, we use something called a vendor demonstration agreement, which we learned from John Doyle, who was on our board that used to run Palantir's intelligence business. Once we figured out like how to run VDAs, it's a legal document that program offices usually are familiar with and they're comfortable with signing. It's, it's kind of a little bit flexible in terms of how many accounts you can allocate, how long the VDA can be. But that construct, once we sort of learned how to do that, that was really, really key for us in our early go-to-market. So, we use vendor demonstration agreements. We've tried CRADAs. We haven't had as much luck with them. VDAs are a little bit lower friction, but it's like a huge, tool to have in the toolkit for early DoD go-to-market, I think.
That's amazing. And Nini, to bring you in here, when you have those early conversations with some of these program offices where, they're responsible for billions, if not tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars in some cases. And, a small company comes along and says, hey, we want to get $5-10 million. Very often these program managers, they don't even have the mental capacity, the time in the day to think about things at that scale. How do you know when a conversation with a program manager is on the right track? What are the things that they're looking for when you walk in that door to have a productive conversation?
Yeah, well, the first thing we do is try to deeply understand what that program manager cares about. As you said, they are building really large capability sets. They're thinking about future-looking requirements. And we want to have done a lot of work on our end of understanding the capabilities they've already deployed in that program and what they're trying to do next, such that we have some sort of hypothesis that we can start iterating on with them around where the capabilities we've already deployed with user groups that they care about start to integrate into that overall vision. The mistake that we made early and took a while to figure out, and we're still figuring out, to be honest, is you can produce many, many mission outcomes with users that get people very, very stoked along the lines of what Brett was describing with this Marine Corps colonel. But the reason that he was introducing us to program offices is because we had started to create together a vision for how this fit into a longer term program that the Marine Corps was already oriented around and was focused on building. And we came in again with this hypothesis of how what we deployed could integrate, augment, and then in fact, like by the end of our relationship, or, we're still in relationship, but by the end of this early part of the relationship, kind of transform that vision of the program that they were building. You have to find those points of intersection between what you're building and what they're building. I think the mistake is just thinking people are going to care because great things are being produced from your pilot. And you really have to do the work to help yourselves and eventually the program managers imagine how this fits into that broader vision, a broader vision that you didn't create, that's probably worked through multiple iterations of the, of PALM working groups and requirements working groups before you showed up. Does that make sense? I'm happy to get more specific there, but it's basically you can't just walk in with this is our product and these are the amazing things that we're creating without having done the homework on what that program office is trying to build.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, you both have written a little bit about how you leverage the UFR, the unfunded requirements process to get some of the early dollars in. I think it was some creative stuff that was, able to tap into really essential needs that were more important than just kind of SBIR innovation funding. But when you think about, working with these program offices to go from, $2 million to $10 or $25 million contracts, and then kind of get yourself into the PPBE process for longer term programs of record. I'm curious just what that process has looked like for you all. What are the, even things as simple as, okay, well, we've got to be accredited to deploy on IL 5, 6, right? These different types of networks, or you've got to go through kind of this type of test and evaluation process. What are some of the things that you all have had to do to kind of reorient the company to be prepared to deliver a capability at potentially $100 million scale as a program versus where you started from some of these pilots that kind of caught fire at the right time?
The big way we've reoriented the company is around thinking every single person involved in like the squad of people deploying these products is thinking that they're solving the very large mission problem that the program office is trying to solve, not that we're deploying a set of products and then licensing those products to the government. I think if we spend the meeting talking about, Decrypt and some of our other capabilities called Telescope and Local and what each of these products is designed to do and what they've produced, like that really doesn't matter to a program manager who's trying to solve a problem like non-kinetic operations and strategic competition. The product names and their individual uses mean nothing to that person. What matters is whether when they add up to a whole, that whole looks like non-kinetic operations and strategic competition. And so that's how we've oriented our product teams, our mission teams. The product manager is not the product they're building. The mission person is not the unit that they've deployed those products with. They are all on the team of the program office that's trying to solve these really big, challenging national security problems that the DoD is grappling with right now. And I think Brett can talk about what that looks like in more depth on the product side. But I think that's been the big unlock. Once you get there, it's not about whether it's a unfunded requirement or a PALM request. It's how are we planning for kind of the hopefully catastrophic success of the sets of capabilities that add up to that really large mission problem.
So Brett, if I can ask you a follow on there, you wrote about how if you're not solving really a top 3 defense problem, you're not going to get any love. You're not going to get any traction as an early stage company, as a newcomer. Yet now, so you all introduced your first product. At some point, you made the decision to build a second, to build a third, to explore these other opportunities. And I'm curious how those two things are at tension. How are all of those products all focused on a top 3 area? Are they kind of competing with each other? Or what was the moment when you guys decided, okay, we are going to expand not just by finding more customers for an existing product, but we're going to now introduce another product to grow our impact?
Yeah. So we always knew that as a defense company, we would have to be multi-product. In order to earn the right to do that, though, you have to build, like one product. You have to start somewhere. You got to start with like one product that people actually want to buy and solves a problem and generates revenue. So once Decrypt, it became clear to us that Decrypt was probably going to, get to product market fit in defense. We then kind of started looking at other missions. So we've made a bunch of product bets. I think we probably have I call it 4 maybe that I would say are in the realm of product market fit, but we've made probably 8 bets, or maybe even a little bit more. And so not every bet that we make is going to work, and that's okay. The trick is double down on the things that work and kill the ones that don't. In terms of how we think about where to make bets, it's still very much focused on mission problems. And so our domain expert, the missions that we know best, and we think better than most other teams, are kind of around the strategic competition space. And so we started Decrypt as kind of more in the intel type realm in terms of missions that we cover, but we started seeing other sets of missions that were really, really important, but had really terrible solutions for. A recent example for this for us is maritime sensing. Pretty important problem for Indo-PACOM and in the Navy. Not really great solutions right now. When we make a product bet, then we're not making a bet on a particular solution. All right, we're going to build a sensor that has these characteristics and these features and parameters, and then we're going to ship that and it's going to work out great. That's not how we do it. We more bet on all right, we know that there is this specific type of vessel, say, that we want to be able to sense, and that is the direct. That is what we need to solve. And what is it? Hardware? Is it software? Is it hardware plus software? What kind of hardware and software that? I don't care as much about that. It's just mostly trying to keep people laser focused on generating the mission outcome for the products that we develop. Does that make sense? And the trick is because we're for Decrypt, we got lucky in that we had deployments across many different groups that had many different missions, and that gave us exposure in domain expertise on kind of what missions are mattering most that are common across these groups and where the gaps are, where our existing tools, where they not exist or where they not particularly good. And we kind of just incrementally, as we've gotten more and more breadth, that's allowed us to kind of make more and smarter bets across different groups on different product areas.
It does make sense. And it begs the question of how should we think about what is Vannevar? Is Vannevar a product studio? Is Vannevar a data processing infrastructure that has apps built on top of it? How do you all talk about the core of the business and how it informs future trajectory of the company?
Yeah, kind of we're at, at least in the next 3 years, our focus is on becoming the defense prime that owns a lot of the non-kinetic strategic competition missions across DoD. That is sort of where we are focused. That's not who we are as a company. That's just our 3-year focus. The broader problem that we wanted to solve when we started this was, national security, really important. U.S. government, DoD also has an enormous budget. Why is it that, for me, it was CIA? Why is it that the counterterrorism center at CIA for the particular mission that I was working on has some of the worst tools that I've ever seen from a software standpoint? Why are the best engineers in the world? At the time, it was Islamic State, 2016, really important. We should have the best product people and engineers working on that problem, and we didn't. Why is that? Where it's not a money problem. We're investing, in some cases, hundreds of millions on particular programs. So that's the Vannevar as a company is. We should never have that happen again. We should be the team or one of the teams, and we should help other people do this too. This is why we're trying to help other defense people kind of figure out how to do this. It shouldn't be the case that in 10 years the defense, we look at the top 10 defense companies and it's all the same defense primes. That's a total fail on our part. We would like to be on that list, and we also want to help other companies be on the list. For us, it's the broader mission is just getting the best engineers, product people, and technology that we have as a country on the problems that are important. And if you do that, you can build a big, successful business off of that. The defense primes are very large businesses, but there's just a better path.
I love that. Thank you for that reflection, Brett. Nini, I'm curious, since you all do have as part of the mission, supporting other companies in in growing in this space so that it's not the same 10 companies in the next few years. I'm curious, what do you think is different about building a defense tech company in 2024 than when you all started in 2018, 2019?
Yeah, when we got going in 2018, 2019, we're talking to anyone about, hey, we're starting a defense tech company. Anyone who knew anything about defense or anything about sales thought that was the craziest or stupidest idea they'd ever heard. And there were very few examples that we could point to prove them wrong. I mean, the small set of companies we're all familiar with now that have gone on to build really large, great programs with the government, Anduril, Palantir, SpaceX. Obviously, we're 5 years deep into this now. The ecosystem, the generation of companies is changing. Like Vannevar is part of a cluster of companies that is building, technology for some of these really important missions in government. And Brett and I benefited a ton when we were first starting from people at particularly Palantir and Anduril that were really generous with their time and continue to be in helping us figure out the next stage of the business and the next stage of the business. And so I think, knowing that we couldn't have gotten to where we are now without people like that, we want to be, some of the people in this next set of emerging companies that's taking, some of the very hard won lessons, like the ones we've shared around, building product, building relationships with program managers, deploying for the mission, all of those things, and start sharing them more broadly, so that, another 5 years from now, we're seeing a whole new set of primes, as Brett said.
Absolutely love that. That mission is, I think, essential. It's obviously what a small part of, or we're hoping to make a small drop in the bucket with shows like this and kind of what we're doing here today. Give us a preview. What the next few years for Vannevar? What should we be looking to see? Are we going to see Vannevar winning programs of record in the near term? Is it just a diversification, spread out across a variety of industries? Are you all thinking about M&A or strategic acquisition for growth? What should we be holding our breath waiting for?
I think the most important things we need to do, there's kind of like two of them. The first one, which is what we're primarily focused on for probably this year and next year, is around building and winning programs with DoD. There are not very many companies that have done this, and there's actually different schools of thought about how you go about it. And our school of thought is slightly different than like the Anduril and probably the SpaceX model. And it's not totally clear, like, who's like, are we right? Like, clearly Anduril is doing something really well. We're trying to figure out kind of like what our version of that playbook is, given like the unique set of missions and problems that we go after. And from a company standpoint, you have to organize the company differently when you're kind of going after programs. You have to sort of like think about how you embed product people and engineers on deal teams and program teams a little bit differently. You kind of have to think about like product development a little bit differently. Certainly like sales, government relations, like how you deal with program offices, getting into the POM process. There's like a totally different set of skills and tools you need to transition from sort of like the UFOR playbook to this big program playbook. And it is absolutely fundamental to like that we figure that out for success of the company. And we're really focused on it right now. And so I'd say that is the number one thing that we need to do over the next few years. The second focus for us is on the product. So when you're thinking about, like, for us, like we're trying to get to, like $1 billion-ish in revenue by 2030. That's super hard. I have no idea if we're going to hit that. But in addition to thinking about sort of the program pipeline that you have, you also need to think about the product pipeline that you have. Do you have the pipeline of products that supports getting you to that revenue base? Are you covering missions that you think are going to be big enough that you'll hit that revenue base? And that requires you to think, because of the time it takes for products to hit scale and hit product market fit. You have to think about that. If you need a certain product pipeline in 2027, 2028, you need to be thinking about that like now. And so I spent a decent amount of time thinking about that and thinking about, okay, how do we set up like the engineering and product teams to go execute against that? As our product portfolio increases, like, how do you like kind of take that and tie that into sales? And there's just a ton of like organizational kind of tweaks and changes that you always have to be making. But for us, like I don't know, I mentioned we've built like 10 plus products, 4 of which are kind of in sort of the scaling-ish phase right now, or product market-ish phase. We're going to keep our pace of new product development is like accelerating, not decelerating. And we started like the first hardware product we built, we launched on a DoD with a DoD partner overseas this month. And so we're kind of getting a little bit more, I don't know what the right word is, like aggressive about the product bets that we're making.
I love it. So what we should expect is more, better, faster, and just in more, seeing Vannevar winning in different parts throughout the government, having mission impact, and hopefully it'll be possible to even talk a little bit more publicly about some of the things you're doing. Although non-kinetic, interestingly enough, it tends to be a maybe even more secretive space. One more question for you all on the scaling front, and then we'll go to a lightning round and wrap. We talk to a lot at Front Door, a lot with talent, and there's a lot of folks that I speak with every day who are looking to break in to the defense tech space. I think it's hot right now. It's getting a lot of attention. You got Y Combinator putting out a call for startups. You've got more folks investing. There are more companies, and therefore just more opportunities for tech-focused folks to join great companies like Vannevar. How do you all think at this stage of growth, as you all have post kind of Series B, scaling the company? What are the types of profiles that are most in demand at Vannevar today versus maybe where you were a couple years ago when you were just getting off the ground?
Yeah, so I think, and Nini, definitely be curious what you think, but I think for people transitioning into defense, for example, like veterans and honestly just anybody, like general business folks do, I think it's important to know that in a defense startup, you kind of are playing one of two roles. You're either building and deploying a product, so you're product engineering, or you're somehow involved in that, or you're selling the product. Like as a business, you need to be touching one or both of those functions to be kind of like core to any team, especially in the early days, because that is like literally all you have the budget to fund is people that are either building things or helping you sell things that are being built. So I think, like product engineering and then BD and like customer success are kind of the key functions there. When you think about like the best leaders in the defense space, sometimes I get questions about people that are trying to like, career trajectory to sort of like, company leadership position, whatever that may mean. But the best leaders in defense that I've seen at Anduril, Palantir, great people at Vannevar, kind of all are a little bit cross-functional. Usually they're deep experts in one area. So for example, engineering, but they're also dangerous in one or two other areas, maybe engineering plus like also kind of good, like unreasonably good at BD for some reason, or unreasonably good at like product scoping. So you look for, as you kind of have people developing their careers in defense, the advice that I give people is like, get really good at one function and also like start getting good at a second function, like start thinking more cross-functionally. The other last thing I'll say is like, I don't really know how to articulate this. There's a lot of stuff that we look for when we're interviewing, like low ego being really important, because ego is kind of like the enemy of learning. And in a startup, especially one that's when you're still figuring out how to do things, you need to be like as oriented towards learning as possible and making mistakes and being okay with that and owning up to them and then learning from them. But the other characteristic that we look for, and we look for it in different ways in different functions, is kind of this like irrational hunger to like do something impactful on the mission that causes people to like be kind of like abnormal in how like focused and good they are at their jobs. Like an example of this is, I don't know, like on the engineering front, you see this in other companies too, but it's like people like engineers that take such ownership that like when there's like an outage or like a bug or something, they take that personally and they fix it. And they also take personally like, hey, are people, am I building things that people are using? They're not like waiting on the product manager to tell them what to do. They're like looking at like what the users are doing, trying to go meet with users, get on base with users, and like figure it out, and then use that to improve what they're doing. That's not typical, but it's and there's different versions of that for each function. But we select for people that are kind of irrationally obsessed about the mission, and therefore just like are really good at their jobs. I don't know if that's helpful or specific enough, but Nini, I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, Noah, is that what Brett described with the previous question about what are you going to see from Vannevar in the next several years, that we're focused on at this point, like, building programs, multiple, numerous of them across multiple DoD services. And then what he described of, to support that strategy of being aggressively multi-product, that means that there are so many opportunities for people to act as business owners at Vannevar. And I imagine this is true of other rapidly scaling defense companies because of that strategy. So you have, on the product side, you have people that are owning a large mission space, and we're going after multiple of those. On the mission side, as Brett said, kind of this, what you think of as the people selling the product, or deploying the product, we have opportunities to own and build large programs with the DoD. And so I think it's unusual when you're looking at a company like Vannevar, a growth stage defense company, versus an equivalent on the commercial side, in terms of the level of really high ownership and really high autonomy that's possible for us. And I think not just possible, but that's who we select for. And we look for the qualities that Brett described: low ego and grit and really intense mission drive, because those are the types of people that succeed when you give them that level of ownership and autonomy to go either build new products or build new programs.
Thank you so much. This is such a master class, not only in the growth trajectory and story, but how you all think about talent and people. It's going to be hugely valuable to folks who are looking to break in. All right, real quick, popcorn, final questions. Just one word answers, and then we'll get you guys out of here. Nini, we'll start with you. Partnerships or direct sales?
Direct sales.
Direct sales. Brett, VC or bootstrap?
VC, unfortunately.
Nini, hardware or software?
I'm going to say software, but as Brett said, it doesn't matter if you're solving the problem.
And Brett, here's one for you. AI or machine learning?
I like deep learning. People stop using deep learning for some reason. I want to bring that back.
There it is. We're bringing it back. Amazing. Brett, Nini, you both have been hugely generous, not only with your time today, but with your time and investment in the ecosystem for the community. If folks are interested in learning more about Vannevar or about joining your mission, where should they go?
Yeah, go to the website. We've got all of our jobs posted there. And also kind of get in contact with us. I feel like we've got, depending on, we get a lot of engineers, product people that's on the team. Look us up. You may know some folks that work with us. So just get to us however you can.
Amazing. All right. Thank you both so much for making time today. We're rooting for you. We look forward to watching what Vannevar is going to do in the near and distant future. It's an amazing story, and we're rooting for you.
Thanks for having us, Noah.
Thanks, Noah.